I know that you care. My faith is
For those that weren't here at our anointing with oil services last year, welcome back. Welcome back. This might be your first church service of 2019, which is exciting. And truth be told, I was never the new year, new me guy. I didn't really care about New Year's. Another day, the seconds tick over, and from one year to another, what does it mean? I didn't really care. But recently, I've been more contemplating the significance of seasons. That there is significance to beginnings and there is significance to ends, because seasons bring about a change in vision, and vision allow for a change in expectation, and God always meets us at our place of expectation. So now I'm kind of a guy like, yeah, I like new seasons. I like New Year's. It allows me to shift my vision and take up a gear my expectation, because I'm expecting some things of God this year. And in worship this morning, singing that, I will extol you, Lord, forevermore. I really felt the Holy Spirit say, I'm glad you're expecting things of me, but I'm also expecting some things of you. That maybe this year, this could be the year that regardless, we will extol the Lord forevermore. Whatever diagnoses come our way, will we be a church, will we be a people, will you be an individual that extols the Lord, elevates the Lord in your life forevermore? And I'm expecting some great things of God this year as well. I want some great things for our lives, for our loves, for our church, but also for our city. I'm believing for great things for our city, because I realize in the Bible that cities are important to God. The gospel says it should be spread from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria and all the ends of the world. That means that for us, we need to take the gospel to Carindale, Brisbane, our city, and to the rest of the world, and not just because the gospel is a cool story. The gospel has power. I'm reminded in Acts 16 when there was this fortune-telling girl, a girl that was demon-possessed, and she was following Paul around, and Paul just turns around and says, get out of her. And in that moment, the power of the gospel not only set her spiritually free, but also set her socially free from being enslaved to the people that were making money off her. It turned the economic system upside down for people who were making money off this one trade that wasn't of God. That the gospel brings change. The gospel in itself has power. It's not just a cool story. So I believe that we need to take the gospel to our city. And I believe cities are very important to God, because in the beginning of the Bible, God begins history in a garden, but in Revelation, he finishes it in the city. That in the beginning, in the garden, there is a river and there is the tree of life. And God says to Adam, hey, I don't want you just to have this paradise to chill out and enjoy it. I want you to cultivate it. I want you to create a civilization that brings glory to me. And Adam fails. But through Christ, God eventually gets the civilization that he's looking for. And in Revelations, we read about a new Jerusalem, a new city. Actually, the whole New Testament always talks about it. In Hebrews 11 and Revelations 21, we see these scriptures that talking about the new city. And Hebrews 11 says this, talking about Abraham, for he was looking forward to the city with foundations whose builder and maker is God. And in Revelations 21, we see the whole purpose that Christ came to redeem was to make this civilization. I saw a holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. Because we don't go live in the clouds. That's not the goal here. We actually live in this incredible city where the streets are gold and it glorifies God. And just like in the beginning there was a river and a tree of life, this city has a crystal river and a tree of life that is said to bring healing to the nations and to put a death blow to the curse that was started at the start. That this is a paradise. Actually, I've got a picture about the scale of this city. If we can put the picture up on the screen, please. Now, this is not the actual image of the New Jerusalem, as you may well guess, but this is the size of it. Look, and this may not be the geographical location, but look how big this thing is compared to the earth. It is 2,220 kilometers wide by 2,220 kilometers long by 2,220 kilometers high. This thing is huge. And I just want to put a bit of reality to what the city is going to come down. We don't just go and play harps in the cloud. That's not what heaven is. Jesus said, I'm leaving the planet. I'm going to prepare a place for you, a paradise for you, and it's a city. And it's coming down, and the streets are paved with gold, and there'll be no sickness or no sorrow, which brings me a great hope, because our present isn't our permanent. What we're going through in this temporary existence, this temporary circumstances is not our forever. That's why the church is so hopeful, because this is not our eternal residence. There is a city coming where the streets of God, where you have a mansion where God has prepared for you, where this tree of life is going to heal the nations. There will be no war or animosity, where we will live in peace to the glory of God. And this is why the church can be hopeful. This is why the church has a better way, because we're not citizens of here. We're citizens of a future city, a heavenly city. Cities were always part of God's plan. So what does that mean for us now on earth? Do we just we'll just hang out for that cool yellow box that's going to come down and drop on that globe? We'll just wait for that. No, actually, God says, no, cities now are supposed to be a shadow of that city. Cities now are supposed to mirror the goodness of that city. And so as we see in the Bible, God outlines really three functions of what a city was supposed to do. A city was designed to do. If a city, I've said city a lot, haven't I? I've said if Brisbane was going to look like what God designed for it, it would meet these three functions. I'm going to put them up on the screen. God's design for cities. Number one, it was designed to be a place of refuge and community for diverse peoples. This is one of the first functions of the city, that when Israel went into the promised land, first and foremost, it was a place of refuge for people, that people, different diverse groups, minorities, could come into this place and find refuge and find a treatment for loneliness. They could find community here. And this is one of the great parts of being a city, that in a small town, I grew up in quite a small town, and if you're a minority or a diverse people group, you stand out. But in a city, people can commune over their differences. Every diverse people is supposed to reflect a different avenue of God's glory. But a diversity and different minorities are supposed to be joined in the city, that each different culture, each different way they do life reflects something different about the city. A city was supposed to be merciful and accepting, a place where these people can come and live together, all shining for the glory of God. That's the first function of what a city can be. Number two, it was supposed to be an epicenter of development and culture. And we can see this. If you live in the city, you are pressed into excellence. You don't make it in the city by being subpar. And this is actually one of the things that God designed, that one, when you are around people that are unlike you, it challenges you. When you are people that are like you, or maybe in the same industry as you, but they're better than you, it challenges you. And that way in the city, we see gifts and capacities. We see the depths of the human heart really plumbed and come to fruition. We see people reach their potential more in the city, because due to competition or cooperation with others, we see the best come out. Sometimes the very best of humanity, or sometimes the very worst. And due to this, we see the greatest artists. We see great arts, great works of technology, great ministries come through these large habitations of people in our city. And this was God's design, but it was God's design that these great things, these great advances would glorify Him. That was the purpose of the city, that we would be who we're called to be, humanity to reach its potential for the glory of God. The third function is a place of spiritual searching and finding God. This is what cities were supposed to be as well. In fact, ancient cities were all built around this, the first skyscrapers called the ziggurat. And what they were, these different cities worshiped different gods. And the ziggurat was the skyscraper where their god of that city was supposed to descend upon. It was like their home. It was like a poor image of the original Jerusalem temple. And while we don't build skyscrapers to different gods now, cities are still a spiritual hotbed. That in a small town, your life philosophy and your belief system usually goes fairly unchallenged. But when we are confronted with so many different people groups, so many different worldviews, in a city, you're forced to ask yourself, why do I believe what I believe? Yeah. In fact, Dr. Timothy Keller has this great quote about spiritual hotbeds in cities. Therefore, we see today that our cities are both the home of the most unbelief, of the most blatant human idolatries and hostility to Christians. Yet, at the same time, cities grow the best churches with the greatest and richest ministries. That's because of the dynamics of the city. In fact, Christians in the city may sense this paradox. On one hand, you may find it harder and far more challenging to live in the city, but on the other hand, it's a far more fruitful place to minister. This paradox, and this is what happens in our city. It's a spiritual hotbed. It was designed that people could come into cities and search and find God. That was the original intentions. But often, we don't see cities do this. And in Genesis 11, we see a city, the city of Babel, and you might know it from the Tower of Babel, this place that was built up. See, straight after the flood, they all get out of the ark, they start multiplying across the earth, and God says to the people, all right, new plan, here we go. What's going to happen? You guys are going to scatter. You guys are going to multiply and scatter, subdue the earth, be diverse, have all these different cultures that reflect different parts of who I am, go across all the earth and multiply. And so the people are like, oh yeah, good plan, God. I like where your head's at. Cool, that's good, that's good. Instead though, what about we do like the exact opposite? What about we try that and see how it goes? And so these people in Genesis 11, verse 4, instead of doing what God's asked them to do, in verse 11, verse 4, they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the sky. Let us make a name for ourselves, otherwise we'll be scattered throughout the earth. It didn't end well for Babel. See, Babel, this is the first time, instead of glorifying God, instead of putting him first, this thing crept into their belief system, it crept into their hearts, which says, me first. And every human is born with this. You see in children, you don't need to teach them this, but somewhere on the line, they're like, me first, what about me? It's not just Shannon Knoll that cries out, what about me? Every single person seems to have this ability to be, what about me? Me first. What about, got to look out for number one. And even in a marriage is the most intimate community that God has designed. If one or both people have the attitude of me first, that relationship will be quite sick and quite hard. People will be constantly grating against one another. That relationship works when both people say, no, you first. It's actually more fruitful when both people say you first. It's quite counter-cultural thinking that if I don't put myself first, it's actually better for me. That's a weird concept to what we might usually think, but when we both say you first, that marriage flourishes. And here in Babel, we see a people that say me first. Let's make us a city for ourselves. Let's make a name for ourselves. It's the basis of self-salvation. These people saying, no, God, we don't need you. Good plan, I liked it. It was pretty good, but how about we do what we want and we create this city? And we put the slide up on screen. We see what happens when a me first attitude affects the three functions of a city. Instead of a place of refuge and community for diverse peoples, it turns into the fragmentation and exploitation of peoples. It turns into different minorities trying to get on top of one another and exploit one another for power. Instead of an epicenter of development and culture that builds towards the glory of God, we see development still and culture still, but not building towards God, still trying to do the whole Babel thing and build and make a name for ourselves. A place of spiritual searching and finding, it turns into escape from God, not finding God. And the very first city in the Bible, the city of Cain, which had this attitude, Cain actually built it as a refuge from God, a place to hide from God, that people now can sometimes come to cities to try and hide that nagging sense in the heart that maybe God's real, maybe there's something else for me, and they go to cities to hide from God. And I always wonder then, what is our purpose? Like if cities are going this way, how do we make them more like that? How do we get back to God's design for our city? What do we do as Christians? As God sent us from that heavenly city, as he sent us from that eternal residence in that awesome paradise to come down here, and now we are to fight with the people of the world. Hey, I'll tell you how it's supposed to be. We're Christians, we're Citipointe Church, and we're here to take the city. You know, let's get them. Come on, we're here to fight. Actually, Jeremiah 29 says no, when God sends you to a place, you need to seek the peace and prosperity of the city. So our battle for the city, if we want to make a difference, it's not on the level of people. How do we fight it? How then do we really make a difference in our city? And through our research in this, I've learned that a city has a powerful magnifying effect. That since God invented it as this cultural mind of development, a cultural mind, what is in the human heart is brought out by large habitations of people. And so in Brisbane, where we have millions of people, many people are following God's design, which is great, but a lot aren't. And so we see the greatest capabilities, the very best and the very worst of humanity brought out. But our battle isn't on the place of people versus people. And we see the cultures that happen in these people groups start to be magnified by the city. There's this magnifying effect. In fact, in 2010, there was a synopsian of looked at the cultures of Europe and sees how little community cultures affect the city on a whole. And this excerpt I'm going to show you is from one they looked at Iceland. And although it's a European country, the premise remains the same. And this is talking about theatre. Maybe you think this has got nothing to do with what we're doing in church, but it says this: despite Iceland's tiny population of 320,000 inhabitants, of who no more than 120,000, now, Andrew King told me how to pronounce this between services, Reykjavik. Yeah, live in Reykjavik. In all the statistics of the past 50 years, the country has a large community of avid theatre goers. So individuals love the theatre. There was communities built around this love of theatre. And then Iceland went through this total collapse of its financial system. Icelanders woke up in 2008 much poorer than they used to be, yet the cultural consequence is that subscriptions to the National Theatre and City Theatre went up 600% in 2009. Money went down, it went up. Subscriptions for the Symphony Orchestra series and Concert Hall went up 300%. That means there is a tremendous reappreciation of community culture. You see, what's happened in communities, what these little communities are valuing, the city magnifies. And it comes across a whole city. And in this case, it went across the whole nation, that what a community valued, the city magnified. And if we look at the example of Babel, if we looked at Babel, see where it started with Babel, there's these levels. It doesn't start on the people level, it starts on the individual level. It starts with one person saying, me first. Yeah, God, you got a plan? Great. Me first. I want what I want. I want to make a name for myself. And what happens when a group of me first people get together? Like-minded people, they form a community of me first. They all say, let's make for ourselves a tower. Let's build for ourselves a name. And the city magnifies the value of that community. You see, the battle isn't on the level of skyscrapers and TV stations. The battle isn't even the level of person to person. The battle for our city takes place in the arena of the human heart. The battle for our city takes place on the level of desire. What do you want? Who's on the throne? That's where the battle for... What would it look like if a person, an individual in 2019 maybe said, all right, okay, well, not me first. God first. What if I don't put my plans first, but I put the plans of God for my life first, the one who sees all, knows what's best for my life, knows what's fruitful for my life. What if I put him first this year? What if an individual did that? What if a community did that? What if those like-minded people who said, no, not me first? What if they formed a community, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of people, not putting down minorities, but accepting them? What if they got together every Sunday and said, no matter who you are welcome in our building? What if they said, no matter what you've done, we love you because we have an unconditional love from God? What would our city look like if a magnifying glass was put on that community? Because that's us, we the church. We're the hope to the hopeless. We're the power to those who have no power. We're the hope of the future. We're the people who say, you're lonely, we have community you can be enfolded into. You're confused, we know the truth. You're in conflict, we are the peacemakers. We're the church because we don't come to church to experience a revival with God. We come to church to join with others to go out and be revival in our city. What would a community look like? What would our city look like if we learned to be a community that was not me first, but God first? What would our city look like if that was magnified? A city within a city. But how do we become that community? How do we become such a beacon of light to our world that the magnifying glass of Brisbane gets put on churches, the body of Christ, that our city becomes God's design? Our city becomes functionally available, that we can have people from diverse minorities come in and feel welcome here. How do we create God's design? What do we need to do? And in Matthew 5, we see Jesus talking to his disciples about how to be that beacon, how to be that lighthouse. It says this, you are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand. It gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. I love that verse in 15. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket. Like, what a silly thing to do. Yet so many of our lives we can say, oh, why aren't we reaching the world? It's because involuntarily or voluntarily we can put a basket over the light of Christ that's in our heart. And I'll pull 2 quick points out of this that's going to help us be the community, that's going to help you be an individual light, live your greatest life in 2019, but help us be a community that when the magnifying glass of Brisbane is on, makes our city better. The first is this: light is beautiful, but it exposes. There is this duality with light. That one part, it says here that people are going to look upon your good works, look upon the light that comes from your life, and they're going to glorify your Father in heaven. That there is something very attractive about light. But light also exposes. It shines into dark places and reveals things that people maybe didn't want revealed. That it creates an attraction about your life, but maybe an animosity in other areas. First off, it's beautiful. That your life should be attractive because of the gospel of Jesus Christ in it. What is light? Light is truth. When we say we want to let our light shine, it means we need to let the truth of the gospel shine. It means in your workplace, maybe in business, that you might need to do things morally and ethically and not cut corners for financial gain. Maybe relationally, it looks like someone at work, hey Bob, how you going? Oh, I'm struggling a little bit. Chin up, Bob. Sometimes that can be our surface level conversation, but maybe if we have the truth of the gospel in our life, we can go that level deeper of questioning and be like, hey, do you want to have lunch? What's actually going on? Because if there is a person that believes all hope is lost, the truth is that there is hope. You are the light into that situation. You can tell them that there's hope. If there's a person that can't see a future, you can tell them they have a destiny in Jesus Christ. Because the light needs to shine. Maybe letting your light shine is simply not going with the flow. Maybe people are doing things and you need to say, no, I'm not going that way. Maybe, no, I will not have that other drink. No, I won't watch that movie. No, I won't let my kids be a part of that. Sometimes just not going with the flow is shining light. See, and when we do these things, people are going to look at your life, be like, you went through that really hard time, but you didn't crumble. You didn't break. How? How did you do that? I went through something similar and it wrecked me. How is it possible that you're still standing? How is it possible that you have so many friends, a community and whatever? At that church, you seem like you're always smiling. You seem like you're always happy. What is it that there should be something about our life? When you take the basket off your life and let light shine, something will be attractive about your life. But the second part is it exposes things. And so some people are going to look at your life and they'll be like, hey, whoa, you think you're better than me? You don't want to have one more drink? You think I'm a bad person? Some people can arc up a bit. It'll bristle them a little bit. There'll be a little bit of conflict because the way you live is a different standard. The way you live might convict them a little bit. And it might cause you to get left out from stuff. Maybe you won't get invited to a party. Maybe you'll be left off a project at work. That there might be these times where there's a little animosity because that light that is in you shines into dark places and people don't like having light shine on the things that they find shameful in their life. And so light has this duality about it. And we need to have that duality about us, that the gospel is so attractive to people that are looking, but to some people, it causes this animosity. But the Bible says, just before this verse in Matthew chapter 5, blessed are you who are persecuted for my sake. Blessed are you. And this doesn't mean, this is a little side note, it doesn't mean you go around saying, you're wrong, the way you're living wrong. That's not going to be best persecuted for Jesus' name's sake. You're just going to cop some hate because you're being obnoxious. And so we need to make sure that we're letting the light of Christ shine and not just our human will for their life. We need to let our light shine, not just our opinion shine, not just that we are lofty and raise ourselves above people, but we are to seek the peace and prosperity of our city. Light is beautiful, but it also exposes. Expect that. And Charles Spurgeon says this great quote. It says, the Christian is to be a lighthouse, a lantern, a guiding star. Their light will be increased as they learn more of Christ. See, the brightness of your light is proportional to your dependence on the light. How bright you shine depends how dependent you are on Jesus. And I would love us in 2019, maybe this is the year that if you're honest with yourself, you've had that basket over your life. You know that the light's in you. If you're saved, the light is in you. It's not a matter of do I have the light in me or not. It's whether you let it shine. And Jesus clearly says, that's your choice. I'm not going to make you do it. It doesn't make any sense that you have a light and put a basket over. It doesn't make any sense that we have the truth, we have the answer, and we don't share it to the people that really need it. Light is beautiful, but it exposes. And point two, final point is this. You can't be a city by yourself. At the start of this in Matthew 5, Jesus says this, you are the light of the world, a city on a hill that cannot be hidden. Most of the other places in the Bible, Jesus says, I'm the light of the world. But here, he is the supreme light. See, what he means by that is this. If the world wants to know who God is, they look at Jesus. He is the light, he is the truth. The best representation of who God is was Jesus. And then Jesus says, hey, I'm going. I'm going to prepare that awesome new city, that new Jerusalem for you. So now you are the light. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. It seems like he's jumping between metaphors. One's light, one's a city on a hill. But if we see the viewpoint that God has in mind, we said these actually gel well together. Because the way that we can show who God is to the world is by showing him the light. But this verse says the way that we can show who God is to the world is not best done as individuals. It's best done as a city on a hill, and you can't be a city by yourself. See, God is saying the same thing we were talking about before, that the best way to show the city who we are is by being a community. Now, why? I understand, why is that? Why, God, if I can just be an individual? In fact, there's an American study came out that said 80% of Americans say you can be a great Christian by yourself. You don't need to go to church. Which you can definitely be saved without going to church. But the best way to shine the light to the world, and if you care about the world, if you care about your city, is to be in a community, the community that we talked about here, that if the magnifying glass of the city is on, then it magnifies who God is. Why? Why is community powerful? I think because at the very heart of the gospel is relationship. At the very heart of the gospel is this, that you cannot restore your relationship with the Father by yourself. The base of the gospel is this, that someone else had to come. That Jesus had to come, that you can have a relationship with the Father. That is the basis of the gospel. But the repercussions of that is that when that relationship is restored, all other relationships can now be restored. When that relationship is restored, then you can be someone who is no longer me first, but God first. Imagine our solar system. Planets revolving around a sun. All the planets had their own orbit revolving around this one central point. Can you imagine that community of planets? One of them's just like, nah, me. Now I'm the center. Everyone revolve around me. Revolve around me. What would that be if all the planets did that? It would be a disaster. It would be a car crash. There had to be something for these individual parts to rotate around. What would a community look like of people who said, no, not me first. We're not going to rotate. I'm not the sun. I'm going to rotate around the sun. And so what does that look like for us as a community? A community of people who don't say me first. A community of people that look out for one another. They don't just come into the service and say, I'm a part of Citipointe Church, because you can go to a movie and not be part of the film. That we come into this place, the people in your row are important. A community looks like letting your lives entwine with them. It looks like, hey, want to get a coffee after the service in Rivers, my shop. As long as it's not a large, those things are like $6. You know, what can we do? What can we be our community? What about finding your life group for this year? You may not see a need for a life group. Do you need a life group? Why do I need a life group? You need to have people around your life outside your immediate family that you can laugh with and cry with and mourn with and grow with and be sharpened by, convicted by, corrected by. Do you have that in your life? Do you have something like that in your life? We need to be a community like that solar system all orbiting around the sun to make this place richer. That city was designed. We are a city within a city. We are the people who don't come in and fragment ourselves. Oh, youth over here, young adults over here. We are one community, one people group that come in and say, I will serve generously because I have gifts and talents to bring to the house. We, the church, I will give generously because I believe that we need that other building that Pastor Joey was talking about. I believe in the future. We are that community. But the thing is, when it comes to me first, is that you can't get rid of it. After all this, you're saying, don't have a me first attitude, but now you're saying you can't get rid of it? You can't get rid of it by yourself. Me first attitude is the posture of a relationship outside of God. The only thing that gets rid of a me first attitude is looking at the gospel of Jesus Christ, that he came to earth. He was sent to make that relationship restored with the Father. He lived the perfect life, free from sin, free from mistake, free from wrongdoing, never a step out of line. And he was the one that deserved that paradise city. He deserved the streets of gold. He deserved the glory. He deserved the honor. And before he stepped into his paradise, he said, no, not me first. And he looked at you and said, you first. He originally said, not me first, you first. And when we look on the gospel of Jesus Christ, that he lived the life that we should have lived and died the death that we should have had, that humbles us completely. That we don't deserve to be me first. We don't deserve it at all, but because of his sacrifice and what he did, we get to walk into that paradise, walk into that future.